you step aboard the longship before the sun has fully decided to rise. The world around you is grey, not the soft grey of morning mist, but the heavy metallic grey of a sky that has forgotten warmth. The fjord behind you is already beginning to stiffen at its edges, thin sheets of ice forming like delicate glass. Ahead of you lies the open sea, darker, deeper, and far less forgiving. The deck beneath your boots is slick with frost. It crunches faintly as you shift your weight. The air tastes sharp, almost metallic, as if each breath carries tiny invisible shards. You pull your woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders, but the wind finds its way through the weave, slipping through every seam with quiet determination. Winter here is not an event, it is a presence. You are not alone, though no one speaks much. Around you the crew moves with deliberate calm. Each man knows that once the sail is raised and the oars dip into the water, there will be little room for hesitation. The sea in winter does not forgive delay. It does not wait for courage to arrive. The longship itself seems almost fragile against the vast horizon. Its curved prow rises like a silent beast, carved from oak, decorated with intricate patterns meant to intimidate unseen enemies. Yet beneath that artistry lies pure practicality. The hull is narrow and flexible, built to bend with the waves instead of fighting them. You can feel that flexibility even now, as the ship shifts gently against the dock, creaking softly like an old tree in the wind. When the ropes are cast off, there is no dramatic moment, no triumphant shout, only the slow glide forward as the oars push against the icy water. The fjord opens, widening, until land begins to shrink behind you. Snow-covered cliffs watch silently as you move toward open sea. The familiar world becomes smaller, and the unknown stretches endlessly ahead. The first true gust of ocean wind hits you as the sail is unfurled. It snaps sharply, a loud crack that echoes across the water. The fabric fills, pulling the ship forward with surprising force. You steady yourself, gripping the edge of the hull. The sea here is darker than the fjord, rolling in long, heavy swells that rise and fall with slow menace. It does not take long before the cold begins to settle deeper. At first, it nips at your fingers and ears. Then it presses against your chest. Eventually, it feels as though it has slipped beneath your skin. Every exposed inch of you becomes aware of the air. Even blinking feels different, as though your eyelashes might freeze together if you hesitate too long. You quickly understand something important. Survival here is not about grand gestures. It is about small, constant adjustments. You flex your fingers often to keep blood moving. You stamp your boots slightly when you can. You shift your shoulders beneath your cloak to trap pockets of warmth. Every motion is deliberate, economical. Energy wasted is warmth lost. The horizon ahead looks endless. There is no comforting shoreline to guide you now, only waves, rising and falling in a rhythm that feels both ancient and indifferent. Somewhere beyond that horizon may lie opportunity, trade, land, wealth. But between here and there lies winter's open water. The crew begins to fall into quiet patterns, 2 men at each oar, pulling in steady coordination when the wind falters. Others checking the sail ropes, ensuring ice does not stiffen them beyond use. The ship creaks and hums with movement, wood flexing against water. That sound, steady and repetitive, becomes strangely comforting. It means the vessel is alive. It means it is holding. The cold sea spray is relentless. Each time the bow cuts through a swell, fine droplets scatter into the air, landing on your face and beard. Within moments, they begin to freeze. You wipe them away instinctively, but more replace them. Soon your beard carries thin crystals of ice, glittering faintly in the dim light. There is no true shelter here, no cabin below deck to retreat into. You exist entirely exposed to sky and sea. Even crouching low does little to escape the wind's reach. The realization settles in quietly. If something goes wrong, there will be no quick rescue, no warm hearth waiting nearby. Only water that steals heat faster than thought. Hours pass without clear measure. The sun struggles behind clouds, offering little guidance. The world narrows to simple sensations. The pull of the oar, the shift of the deck, the whistle of wind through rigging. Conversation is minimal, not because there is nothing to say, but because breath itself feels precious. And yet, despite the severity of it all, There is a strange steadiness in the experience. You begin to sense why these voyages are possible at all. It is not recklessness. It is familiarity. The men around you have known cold since childhood. They understand its language. They do not curse the wind. They anticipate it. When the first distant wave crashes higher than the rest, sending a sheet of icy water across the deck, you do not panic. You brace, you grip, you breathe. The water drains quickly through the gaps between planks. The ship rights itself. It always rights itself. The horizon remains frozen and endless, but something within you has shifted. The fear that existed at the dock, sharp and immediate, has softened into alertness. You are still vulnerable. The sea is still immense, but you're moving through it, not merely watching it. Winter at sea is not a single dramatic battle. It is a slow negotiation between wood and water, between flesh and frost, between human will and indifferent nature. As the longship presses farther into open waters, leaving even the faint outline of land behind, you understand the true beginning of survival is not strength. It is acceptance. Acceptance that the cold will be constant. Acceptance that comfort will be rare. Acceptance that endurance, not speed, will decide whether you return. The frozen horizon stretches on, but so does the ship. And for now, that is enough. Point 2. Longships built for survival. You begin to understand, as the hours stretch into a slow grey ribbon of time, that the only reason you are still afloat is not courage, and not even strength. It is the ship beneath your feet. The longship is not merely transportation. It is protection, shelter, weapon, and lifeline, combined into one narrow frame of oak and iron. The hull flexes again, as a heavier swell rolls beneath you. You feel it clearly now. Not a rigid resistance, but a subtle bend, almost like a living spine adjusting to pressure. That flexibility is deliberate. The planks along the sides are not stacked flat like solid walls. They overlap, layered carefully, in what is known as clinker construction. Each board rests tightly over the one below it, fastened with iron rivets. The design allows the ship to absorb the force of waves rather than shatter against them. If the wood was stiff and thick, like fortress walls, the sea would break it apart. Instead, the vessel moves with the water. It yields just enough to survive. You run your hand briefly along the inside curve of the hull. The wood is cold and damp, but sturdy. Oak was chosen for a reason. It grows slowly in the northern forests. It's grain-tight and resilient. Every plank represents months of labor. Trees felled, split, shaped, and steamed into curved form. Shipbuilding here is not casual work. It is a craft carried through generations, refined by storms survived and storms that claimed lives. The keel beneath you cuts through the water like a blade. It is long and narrow, giving the ship speed, but also balance. That narrowness means there is no spacious deck to roam. You exist shoulder to shoulder with the crew, personal space sacrificed for efficiency. Yet that same slim profile allows the ship to travel where larger vessels cannot, up shallow rivers, onto beaches, into tight fjords. Survival depends not only on withstanding winter seas, but on escaping them when necessary. The sail above you snaps once more as the wind shifts. It is woven from wool, thick and heavy, treated with animal fat to resist moisture. Even so, in winter it stiffens quickly when coated with freezing spray. Two men constantly monitor the lines, breaking thin layers of ice before they grow heavy enough to drag the sail down. If the sail fails, rowing becomes the only option, and rowing in brutal winter winds drains strength with frightening speed. You notice how the mast is not permanently fixed. It can be lowered quickly if needed. This flexibility allows the crew to respond instantly to changing conditions. A sudden storm, a dangerous gust, or the need to pass beneath low obstacles, the ship adapts. Everything aboard is designed with movement in mind. There is no wasted space. Shields line the sides of the vessel, hung carefully along the rails. In battle, they serve as defense. At sea, they act as additional barriers against spray. Even tools are stored efficiently beneath benches where the rowers sit. Ropes are coiled precisely. Loose objects in winter storms become hazards. As another swell rises beneath the bow, you watch how the curved prow lifts, slicing upward instead of plunging downward. The dragon head carving at its tip is more than decoration. Its elongated shape helps guide the water aside, reducing the impact of each wave. The ship does not smash forward recklessly. It parts the sea with measured intent, you begin to notice something else. The shallow draft. The ship does not sink deeply into the water. That means less resistance, more speed, but also vulnerability in rough conditions. Balance becomes essential. The crew instinctively shifts weight during heavy swells, small coordinated movements that keep the vessel steady. Survival is not just about design, it is about how humans interact with that design. Below your feet, there is no lower deck, no hidden storage rooms. Supplies are packed carefully along the center line to maintain balance. Barrels of salted meat, sacks of grain, spare ropes, and small tools, all arranged with deliberate calculation. Too much weight on one side could spell disaster when waves grow unpredictable. The rudder, mounted along the starboard side, requires constant attention. It is large, carved from solid wood, and steered manually. There is no mechanical advantage beyond human muscle and instinct. The helmsman watches the water tirelessly, adjusting to currents you cannot even see. In winter, icy build-up along the rudder must be scraped away quickly. A frozen rudder is no different from losing direction entirely. You begin to realize that the ship is not designed to eliminate danger. It is designed to reduce it just enough. The sea remains powerful, the wind remains indifferent, but the longship gives you a margin, a narrow space between life and freezing water. When snow begins to fall lightly, drifting across the deck in thin spirals, the wood does not crack or protest. It holds when a wave slaps hard against the side, sending spray across the rowers. The overlapping planks distribute the impact. The iron rivets creak softly, but remain firm. You think about how these ships were built without modern measurements, without advanced tools. Knowledge came from experience, from voyages that failed and those that returned. Each improvement, each slight change in curve or plank thickness, lightly followed lessons carved painfully into memory. The cold continues to press against you, but there is a subtle reassurance in the craftsmanship surrounding you. You are not adrift on fragile wood. You are carried by centuries of adaptation. A sudden shift in wind forces the crew to partially reef the sail. Hands move quickly despite numb fingers. The mast groans slightly as tension changes, but remains stable. The ship responds immediately, adjusting its angle against the waves. You feel the difference beneath your boots. The roll becomes smoother, more controlled. This is what makes winter voyages possible. Not brute strength, not blind bravery, but a vessel designed to negotiate with nature instead of defy it. As darkness slowly begins to gather at the edges of the sky, you find yourself listening closely to the sounds of the ship. The creak of wood, the hum of rope under strain, the splash of oars when they dip into water. These sounds become language, signs that everything is functioning as it should. In winter, trust is essential. You trust the man at the rudder. You trust the rowers to maintain rhythm. And above all, you trust the ship. The longship may appear slender against the vast frozen horizon, but it carries within it the accumulated wisdom of generations who learned, sometimes the hardest way, how to survive brutal winters at sea. And as another heavy swell lifts you upward before lowering you gently back into the dark water, you begin to understand. The ship is not simply wood and iron, it is the reason you are still alive. The cold does not announce itself with drama. It settles slowly, quietly, like a patient hunter. By now you understand that the ship may keep you afloat, but it is what you wear that keeps you alive. Out here, on an open deck with no cabin walls and no roaring hearth, your clothing becomes your only true shelter. You begin with wool, always wool. The first layer rests directly against your skin, a simple tunic, slightly coarse but dependable. It scratches faintly when dry, yet when damp it does something remarkable. Unlike many fabrics, wool continues to trap warmth even when wet. The fibers curl naturally, creating tiny air pockets that hold heat close to your body. Those pockets are small, but in winter seas they are the difference between endurance and collapse. Over that tunic, you wear another layer, thicker, heavier, sometimes doubled at the chest. The sleeves extend fully to your wrists, though even then the wind finds gaps. You pull them down carefully, tucking them beneath leather wrist bindings to prevent icy drafts from slipping inside. Every opening must be considered: neck, cuffs, hem. Cold seeks entry relentlessly. Your trousers are also wool, wrapped tightly and often reinforced with strips of cloth or leather at the knees. When you sit to row, the wood beneath you leaches warmth steadily. Without protection, that chill would crawl upward through bone and muscle. Instead, the layered fabric slows its advance. Over all of this rests your outer cloak, heavy, sometimes lined with fur. It drapes across your shoulders and can be pulled around your body when you are not actively rowing or adjusting ropes. The cloak is not tailored elegance, it is practicality. Thick enough to block the worst of the wind, broad enough to cover your arms and torso in moments of stillness. Animal fur plays its part as well. Sheep wool is common, but furs from deer, fox or even bear may be stitched along collars and inner linings. The fur traps additional warmth, especially around the neck where heat escapes quickly. You pull the collar higher as a gust sweeps across the deck, and for a moment the world feels almost manageable. Your head is never left bare. A wool cap hugs your skull tightly, often layered beneath a hood. When conditions worsen, heat escapes upward faster than you might think, and once your head grows cold, clarity fades with it. The Vikings understand this not as theory, but as lived experience. A frozen mind makes slow decisions. Slow decisions invite disaster. Your hands, though, remain a constant struggle. Thick mittens provide warmth, but limit movement. Thin gloves allow better grip on oars and ropes, yet sacrifice insulation. You learn to switch between them when possible. Bare hands for delicate tasks, then quickly covering them before numbness sets in. Fingers stiffen quickly in icy wind, and once dexterity is lost, tying knots or gripping tools becomes dangerously difficult. Leather boots rise high along your calves, often lined with wool or fur. Inside them, additional cloth wraps around your feet. Dryness matters as much as thickness. Wet feet steal warmth relentlessly. When spray soaks through seams, you shift your toes constantly to keep blood flowing. Movement is life. Stillness invites frost. You begin to notice that the crew rarely stands idle for long. Even when not rowing, men flex their shoulders, roll their necks, or stamp their boots. These movements are subtle but constant. They are not expressions of restlessness. They are deliberate strategies against creeping cold. Snow begins again, falling lightly across your cloak. At first it settles gently, but as it melts against the outer layer and refreezes, the fabric stiffens. You brush it away often. Ice buildup adds weight, reduces flexibility, and slowly draws heat outward. Even clothing must be maintained actively at sea. There is no vanity in these garments. Colors are muted: browns, grays, off-whites. Dyes fade quickly under harsh conditions. What matters is durability. Seams are reinforced. Tiers are patched repeatedly. A small rip can allow wind to cut straight through, so repairs are immediate and constant. As the wind shifts again, you pull your cloak tighter and feel how the layers press gently against one another. It is not a perfect defense. Cold still reaches you, but it slows the assault, dulls the edge of the air's bite. That delay gives your body time to respond, to generate heat through motion and breath. You begin to understand that survival is not about eliminating discomfort. It is about managing it. You will not feel warm. You will feel less cold. That is enough. When you sit to row again, your shoulders strain beneath layers of fabric. The bulk restricts movement slightly, but removing it would be unthinkable. You find a rhythm. Pull, breathe, release. The friction between your inner layers creates subtle warmth. Each stroke becomes not only propulsion for the ship, but fuel for your own circulation. Your breath escapes in steady clouds, briefly visible before the wind steals it away. Ice forms along the edges of your cloak, where repeated spray has frozen into thin ridges. Yet beneath those stiffened folds, your core remains guarded by wool and fur, carefully chosen for this very purpose. Generations before you learned through bitter trial that cotton and linen alone fail in such climates. They cling, they chill, they betray. Wool insulates even when damp. Fur shields against slicing wind. Leather resists penetration. Every material has been tested against northern winters long before this voyage. You notice how older sailors adjust their garments instinctively. A hood drawn tighter before a gust. A cloak wrapped differently as rowing intensifies. They waste no motion. They know precisely how much exposure they can tolerate before it becomes dangerous. As twilight deepens and the sea continues its heavy rhythm, your clothing feels less like separate items and more like a second skin. Thick, heavy, imperfect, but essential. Without it, The cold would claim you in hours. With it, you endure day after day. The winter sea remains merciless. The wind still finds cracks. But wrapped in layered wool and animal fur, you have created a narrow barrier between flesh and frost. And in winter at sea, even a narrow barrier is enough to keep breathing. You begin to miss the idea of fire long before you admit it to yourself. Not the roaring blaze of a great hall, not the golden glow that dances across timbered walls. Just a small, steady flame would be enough. Out here, surrounded by endless water and iron-grey sky, warmth feels like a distant memory rather than a present need. On land, fire is simple. It is wood stacked neatly, sparks struck carefully, smoke curling upward into open air. At sea in winter, fire becomes something fragile, almost rebellious. The deck shifts constantly. The wind never truly rests. Moisture seeps into everything. Even if you could build a blaze large enough to warm your bones, the risk would outweigh the comfort. A longship is wood from prow to stern. One careless ember could turn survival into catastrophe. And so, most of the time, there is no fire at all. When darkness approaches and the air grows sharper, you feel the absence of flame most deeply. Your hands ache from rowing. Your shoulders tighten beneath layers of wool. Every instinct whispers that warmth should be waiting somewhere. Yet the only heat available is the heat you create yourself. Through motion, through breath, through proximity to others. Occasionally, in calmer waters and under careful watch, a small contained brazier may be brought out. It is nothing grand, just a shallow iron pan holding coals carried from shore in insulated containers. The crew surrounds it cautiously, shielding the faint glow from wind with their bodies. Even then, it is not meant to warm the entire ship. It is meant to dry damp gloves, to take the edge off frozen fingers, to offer a brief reminder that warmth still exists in the world. You crouch near such a brazier once, feeling the delicate pulse of heat brush your knuckles. It is astonishing how little warmth is required to lift your spirits. The coals do not roar. They whisper. Their glow flickers uncertainly in the wind. You extend your hands carefully, rotating them slowly, unwilling to hog the limited comfort. The smell of faint smoke mixes with salt and wet wood. It is grounding. Familiar. For a few moments, you are not entirely at the mercy of winter, but the brazier cannot stay long. One sudden swell could scatter embers. One strong gust could fan sparks into sailcloth or rope. Safety demands discipline. After brief use, the coals are covered, extinguished, or secured once more. The darkness returns to its previous authority. Most nights at sea offer no flame at all. Instead, warmth becomes communal. You sit shoulder to shoulder with the crew when resting. Cloaks overlap. Bodies press close enough that shared heat forms a subtle barrier against the cold. There is no embarrassment in proximity. Survival has stripped away such concerns. A man's warmth is as valuable as his strength. You begin to understand how critical this shared heat is. Alone, exposed to wind, your temperature would drop steadily. Together, the combined warmth of many bodies slows that decline. It is not comfortable, but it is effective. Breathing becomes another source of subtle heat. You pull your cloak across your face, allowing exhaled air to linger briefly before escaping. The air inside grows warmer than the wind outside. It fogs the space before your eyes, but it helps. Food, too, becomes a kind of fire. When salted meat and hard bread are consumed, your body works to digest them, generating internal warmth. The effort of rowing fuels this process further. You eat not for taste, but for fuel, each bite feeding a furnace hidden beneath layers of wool. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to light a true fire here. A roaring blaze built high enough to defy the wind. The thought is tempting, but unrealistic. The longship was never meant for comfort. It was built for movement, for speed, for resilience. Warmth is secondary to survival, and yet the absence of fire sharpens other senses. You become more aware of the subtle heat created by friction, the warmth in your palms after gripping an oar, the heat along your back after sustained rowing. You notice how quickly stillness drains that warmth away. The lesson is constant. Keep moving. Night at sea deepens differently than night on land. There are no trees to block wind, no walls to trap heat. The stars, when visible, feel impossibly distant and indifferent. The cold intensifies without apology. You wrap your cloak tighter and shift closer to the nearest crew member. Conversation is minimal. Words freeze quickly in such air. There is a kind of mental discipline required in the absence of fire. You cannot dwell on what you lack. Longing for warmth too intensely makes the cold feel sharper. Instead, you focus on small tasks, adjusting a rope, checking a seam, shifting weight with the waves. Attention becomes insulation for the mind. When dawn eventually pushes faint light across the horizon, it does not bring immediate warmth. Winter sun offers little comfort, but its presence signals survival through another night without flame. You begin to respect the quiet ingenuity required to endure this. The Vikings do not curse the sea for lacking hearths. They adapt. They carry warmth within, in muscle, in wool, in shared bodies, in controlled discipline. Fire at sea remains an impossible luxury most of the time, but the absence of fire does not mean the absence of resilience. It means warmth must be earned differently, through movement, through proximity, through careful management of risk. As another day begins and the sail fills with cold wind once more, you accept that comfort will not be part of this journey. Not in the way you once understood it, but survival does not require comfort. It requires endurance, and the quiet ability to create small pockets of warmth in a world that offers none freely. Hunger arrives differently in winter. It is not a sharp pain at first, but a steady, draining sensation, as though the cold itself is consuming you from the inside. Out here, every movement costs energy. Rowing, bracing against waves, even simply staying upright against the wind. Your body burns fuel constantly just to maintain warmth. Without food, the cold would take hold far more quickly. You begin to understand why provisions are chosen not for pleasure, but for survival. When the first meal of the day is passed along the deck, it comes without ceremony. A small wooden chest is opened carefully along the ship's center line. Inside lie strips of salted meat, often beef, sometimes lamb or pork, preserved heavily in brine before departure. The salt has drawn out moisture, making the meat dense and firm. It is not tender. It is not flavorful in any comforting sense. But it does not spoil easily, even in damp conditions. You take a strip and feel its stiffness between your fingers. The surface is dry, slightly white from salt crystals. Biting into it requires effort. Your jaw works slowly, breaking fibers that resist at first. The taste is strong, sharp salt, followed by a faint richness that lingers briefly before the wind steals it away. There is little conversation during meals. Chewing itself is labor. Each bite must be softened carefully before swallowing. In extreme cold, even food feels colder, as if it carries the temperature of the air directly into your mouth. You focus on the rhythm of chewing, on the simple act of nourishing yourself. Alongside the meat comes hard bread, flat, dry loaves baked before departure and designed to last for weeks. They are dense and tough, sometimes nearly brittle at the edges. You tap one lightly against the wooden bench and hear the hollow sound. Breaking it requires force. The bread contains barley or rye, grains hardy enough to grow in northern soil. It is not fluffy or soft, like fresh loaves from a warm oven. It is practical. Each piece provides steady energy, releasing slowly as your body works to digest it. When soaked briefly in water or broth, if such luxury is available, it softens slightly. But most days, you chew it dry. You notice how the older sailors eat deliberately. They do not rush. They know that swallowing too quickly can cause discomfort, especially when your body is already tense from cold. They conserve each portion carefully, aware that supplies must stretch across uncertain weeks. Water accompanies the meal, but it is measured carefully. Stored in barrels, it must be rationed. In freezing conditions, the top layer sometimes forms thin ice that must be broken before dipping a ladle. The water tastes faintly of wood and salt air, but it is life itself. Occasionally, dried fish is brought out. Cod or herring preserved, much like the meat. It carries a stronger scent, sharp and unmistakable. You chew slowly again, aware that protein fuels the muscles required for rowing and sail work. There is no excess. Each man receives enough to function, not enough to feast. You realize that food at sea is not about satisfaction. It is about calculation. The crew must balance weight and supply. Too much food slows the ship. Too little invites weakness. Every strip of meat, every loaf of bread was counted before departure. The act of eating also serves another purpose: warmth. As your body digests the dense meal, heat begins to build subtly in your chest and stomach. It spreads outward in small waves. It is not dramatic, but it is noticeable. You feel stronger after eating, more capable of resisting the wind's constant assault. Sometimes, if conditions allow, and a small brazier can be managed briefly, a thin stew may be prepared from dried ingredients. Salted meat shaved into small pieces, grains added, perhaps a handful of preserved onions if fortune favors you. The broth is thin, but its warmth feels extraordinary. You cup the wooden bowl carefully, savoring each mouthful as steam rises faintly in the cold air. But such moments are rare. Most days, the diet remains simple and repetitive. Salted meat, hard bread, water. Occasionally dried fruit or nuts if they were packed generously before departure. The predictability becomes part of survival. There are no surprises, no indulgences. You begin to appreciate how critical preservation techniques are. Without salt and drying, nothing would last long in damp sea air. Fresh meat would rot quickly. Grain would mold. The Vikings learned long ago that survival depends not only on bravery at sea, but preparation on land. The crew eats at staggered times when rowing schedules allow. Some continue pulling oars while others chew, then they switch. There is no formal dining arrangement. The ship itself is the table. You notice that no one wastes even a crumb. Small fragments of bread are brushed carefully into palms and consumed. Dropped food is picked up immediately, if salvageable. Supplies represent time, days of strength, and time at sea cannot be squandered. As another meal ends, you feel the familiar heaviness settle briefly in your stomach. The energy will soon be called upon again. The oars will dip into icy water. The wind will demand adjustments, and the cold will continue its quiet attempt to drain you. But for now, you are fueled. Hunger may visit again soon. It always does in such conditions. Yet you know there is more salted meat secured in chests, more hard bread stacked carefully along the hull. That knowledge itself provides reassurance. In winter at sea, food is not pleasure. It is insulation from within. It is the slow-burning fire that replaces the hearth you left behind. And as you rise once more to take your place at the oar, jaw still working through the last tough fibers of meat, you understand that survival here is built one bite at a time. Steady, deliberate, and without complaint. You might think that being surrounded by endless water would mean you never have to worry about thirst. The sea stretches in every direction, dark and heavy, rising and falling with slow indifference. Waves slap against the hull. Spray mists your face. Your beard gathers tiny crystals of salt and ice. Water is everywhere, and yet none of it belongs to you. Salt water cannot be trusted. It tempts the desperate, but drinking it would only hasten weakness. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. Your body would fight to rid itself of the salt, draining precious moisture from within. The sea offers abundance without mercy, so fresh water must be carried from land. You glance toward the center of the ship, where small wooden barrels are secured tightly against shifting waves. They are not large. Space aboard a longship is limited, and every barrel adds weight. Before departure, these containers were filled carefully from streams or wells, clean sources chosen with thought. Now they sit sealed, silent guardians of survival. Water is rationed from the beginning. Each day portions are measured with discipline, a ladle dipped into the barrel, a small cup passed hand to hand. No one drinks freely. No one wastes a drop, even in bitter cold, when sweat feels impossible. Your body still loses moisture, through breath, through effort, through the quiet labor of staying warm. The air itself feels dry despite the surrounding sea. Cold wind strips moisture from your lips, your throat, your lungs. You feel it most when you exhale, the vapor cloud drifting away, carrying warmth and water with it. Hours of rowing leave your mouth parched, even when your skin remains chilled. When the top layer of stored water begins to freeze, the crew breaks the thin crust carefully with the back of a knife or the edge of a wooden tool. Ice is removed when possible and melted sparingly if a brazier can be risked. Nothing is done carelessly. Every action weighs risk against necessity. You learn to drink slowly. A small cup is pressed into your hands. The water is cold, nearly as cold as the air, but not frozen. You raise it to your lips and resist the urge to gulp. Instead, you take small swallows, letting each one linger briefly before swallowing. Your body absorbs it gradually. Drinking too quickly would only leave you wanting more, and more may not come until hours later. Sometimes, snow offers temporary relief. When flakes fall thickly enough, a cloak or shield may be used to gather small amounts. The snow is clean at first touch, untouched by deck grime. You scoop a handful into your mouth. It melts instantly, but provides almost no moisture. Snow is mostly air. You would need large quantities to equal a single cup of water. Eating too much snow can lower your body temperature further, so it is done cautiously. Rain is more valuable. When winter rain falls instead of snow, containers are positioned quickly to collect it. Cloaks may be stretched between oars. Shields angled carefully. Every drop captured reduces strain on stored reserves. The crew moves with quiet urgency during such moments. Rain is not an inconvenience. It is opportunity. You begin to feel how water influences mood as well as muscle. When rations run slightly lower than expected, tension rises subtly. No one panics, no one shouts, but glances linger longer on the barrels. Calculations are made silently. Distance to shore is estimated. The helmsman considers routes that might bring you near fresh streams without delaying the voyage dangerously. Thirst is a patient enemy. It does not strike with sudden violence like a storm. It creeps. Your lips crack slightly at the edges. Your tongue feels thick. Focus wavers at the edges of your thoughts. In extreme cases, weakness spreads through limbs already strained from rowing. To prevent this, discipline remains strict. Meals are salted heavily for preservation, but that salt increases thirst. So portions are balanced carefully. Too much salt without enough water would drain strength quickly. The Vikings understand this balance, not through written charts, but through experience carried across voyages. Sometimes dried fruits, if available, are distributed in tiny amounts. They provide not only energy, but a hint of moisture. A single dried apple slice can feel luxurious under such conditions. You chew it slowly, savoring the faint sweetness that cuts through the constant taste of salt and sea. The barrels themselves require care. Wood swells and contracts in cold. Seals must be checked. A cracked barrel would mean disaster. You notice how often sailors inspect the hoops and staves, tightening bindings when needed. Preservation does not end at packing. It continues daily. You become more aware of your own signals. A slight dizziness when standing too quickly. A dryness at the back of your throat that lingers. You do not ignore these signs. You mention them quietly if they persist. Weakness in one man affects the rhythm of the entire crew. At night, thirst can feel sharper. The cold air dries your breath continuously as you rest. Waking with a dry mouth, you resist the temptation to reach immediately for water. Rations must last. You swallow carefully, allowing saliva to gather slowly instead. The sea continues to surround you, endless, heaving, mocking in its abundance. Yet survival depends on those few guarded barrels at your feet. Water, in winter at sea, becomes something sacred, not abundant, not assumed, but earned through foresight and protected through discipline. As you take your next measured sip, you feel the cool liquid slide down your throat and settle within you. It spreads slowly, easing the dryness that had begun to creep in. It is not enough to satisfy completely. It is enough to endure. And endurance, once again, is the true goal. The sea does not always announce its anger. Sometimes it shifts subtly first. A change in wind direction, a heaviness in the air, a low murmur beneath the hull that feels different from ordinary waves. You sense it before you see it. The crew senses it too. Movements become sharper. Eyes lift more often toward the horizon. Then the storm arrives. It does not descend in a single dramatic strike. It builds. The wind strengthens until it no longer whistles but roars. The sail snaps violently overhead, straining against its lines. The grey sky darkens further, pressing down as if trying to merge with the sea itself. Waves that were once rolling swells become jagged walls of moving water. You grip the side of the ship instinctively as the first heavy crash strikes the bow. Ice-cold spray drenches you in an instant. The deck tilts sharply, far more than before. Your stomach lurches, not from fear alone, but from the sudden angle of the world beneath your feet. Commands are shouted, but not in panic. Each voice carries urgency without chaos. The sail is reefed quickly, reducing surface area before the wind can tear it apart. Men scramble to secure ropes, fingers stiff but precise. The mast groans under strain, the longship flexes, its overlapping planks creaking as waves strike again and again. You realize quickly that storms at sea are not brief events. They can last for hours, sometimes longer. The oars are pulled in to prevent them from snapping. Without sail or oars driving you forward, the ship must ride the storm carefully. The helmsman works constantly, angling the bow so that waves meet it properly. If the vessel turns sideways at the wrong moment, a single powerful swell could roll it. The wind slices across your face, stealing breath mid-inhale. Rain mixes with sea spray until there is no distinction between sky and ocean. Water pulls across the deck, faster now, draining through gaps between planks, but never quickly enough to feel safe. Buckets are passed hand to hand to bail excess water when necessary. Your cloak grows heavy with moisture. Wool still insulates, but weight presses on your shoulders. You shift carefully, aware that a misstep on the slick deck could send you sliding dangerously close to the edge. Another wave rises higher than the rest. For a moment it feels as though you are staring at a moving wall of dark glass. Then it crashes down, engulfing the bow entirely. The longship disappears beneath white foam. Water slams into your chest with such force that your breath vanishes completely. For a heartbeat, you know nothing but cold. Then the ship rises again. It always rises again. You cough, spit salt, and regain footing. Around you, the crew does the same. No one wastes time with alarm. Survival requires motion. Ropes are tightened. Loose gear is secured again. The rhythm resumes, even within chaos. The sound of the storm is relentless. Wind howls through rigging like a living creature. Wood groans under pressure. Waves strike with deep, percussive force that vibrates through your bones. There is no silence here, no pause. You begin to understand how easily men could vanish in such conditions, a slip at the wrong moment. The hand missing its grip. The sea does not hesitate. It swallows without trace. And yet, fear does not dominate the deck. Discipline does. Each man knows his role. There is no confusion about who holds which rope, who bails water, who assists the helmsman. Years of practice and previous storms have carved these responses into muscle memory. Panic would only steal precious seconds. The storm continues to build. Lightning flashes faintly within distant clouds, illuminating jagged peaks of water. Thunder rolls low and heavy, blending almost seamlessly with the crash of waves. You feel small, impossibly small, against such power, but the longship holds. Its narrow design allows it to climb waves rather than smash through them. Its flexible hull bends under pressure instead of breaking. Each time you think the next swell might overwhelm you, the vessel adjusts, riding upward before sliding down the opposite side. Your arms ache from bracing yourself constantly. Your legs tremble from maintaining balance. Cold water runs down your back, seeping between layers, yet you remain upright. You remain part of the crew. Time becomes meaningless in the storm. There is only the present moment, the next wave, the next adjustment, the next breath. Eventually, though not suddenly, the wind begins to lose its sharpest edge. The roar softens slightly. Waves remain large, but their rhythm grows less chaotic. Rain shifts to scattered bursts rather than relentless sheets. The storm does not apologize as it withdraws. It simply moves on. You stand there soaked, shivering, but alive. The deck is a mess of pooled water and scattered equipment that must now be reset. The sail, lowered during the worst of it, hangs heavy but intact. The mast still stands. The rudder remains responsive. The sea settles into heavy swells once more. Not calm, but survivable. You glance at the men around you. Faces are drawn and pale beneath wet beards. Hands are raw from rope burn. But there is something else present too. A quiet recognition. You have passed through something that could have ended everything. Storms like this are not rare in winter seas. They are expected. And each one reminds you that survival is never guaranteed. It is earned, wave by wave. As you help re-secure the sail and wring water from your cloak, the horizon begins to reappear through thinning clouds. The world does not look friendly. It never does. But it looks possible again. And for now, that is enough. When the storm fades and the sky clears just enough to reveal its pale winter light, a different challenge emerges. Direction. Out here, in the vast openness of cold water, there are no roads, no signposts, no steady landmarks rising from the earth. The horizon is a circle that follows you wherever you go. It offers no clues, and yet you must know where you are. You look upward instinctively, searching for the sun. In summer, it might arc confidently across the sky, bold and predictable. But winter light is weak. The sun lingers low, sometimes hidden entirely behind thick cloud cover. Its glow diffuses through grey layers, offering little guidance. Still, the helmsman studies even that faint brightness carefully. You begin to understand that navigation here is not precise in the way modern minds might expect. It is a skill shaped by memory, instinct, and close observation. Vikings do not carry metal compasses. They do not consult printed charts. Instead, they carry knowledge, passed down through generations. On clearer days, when the sun briefly reveals itself, its position offers critical information. You learn to notice the angle of light against the mast, the direction of shadows across the deck. Even subtle shifts in brightness can hint at east or west. Experienced sailors read these signals the way others read written words. At night, when clouds part and the sky opens fully, the stars become guides. You lift your eyes to the cold constellations shimmering above. They appear sharper here, far from city smoke or artificial light. Certain stars remain constant in their placement, forming patterns that act as silent markers. The North Star, steady and unwavering, anchors your understanding of direction. Even when waves toss the ship, that distant point of light holds firm in the heavens. The helmsman glances at it repeatedly, adjusting course in small increments. But winter skies do not always cooperate. There are nights when clouds swallow every star, leaving only darkness overhead. On such nights, navigation becomes a matter of feel. The direction of prevailing winds, the pattern of currents beneath the hull, the memory of how long you have travelled in a particular heading. You notice how the crew pays attention to birds as well. Seabirds rarely stray far from land. If flocks appear overhead at dawn, circling and calling, it suggests proximity to shore. Their flight direction offers hints. You follow their path with your eyes, imagining unseen coastlines beyond the mist. Even the colour of water can shift subtly near land. Slight changes in shade, the presence of floating debris or seaweed, these are clues. Experienced sailors scan the surface constantly, interpreting details you might otherwise dismiss. One tool, though simple, holds particular intrigue: a sunstone. You hear it mentioned quietly among the crew. A small crystal, often calcite, capable of interacting with polarized light. When held to the sky and rotated carefully, it can reveal the sun's position even when hidden behind clouds. The technique requires patience and skill, but in overcast winter days it becomes invaluable. You watch as one sailor lifts a small translucent stone briefly toward the grey sky. He turns it slowly, studying the shifting patterns of light within. After a moment, he nods almost imperceptibly and relays a quiet correction to the helmsman. The rudder shifts slightly. The ship adjusts course by a degree or two, barely noticeable but critical over long distances. Time also acts as compass. You measure travel not only in miles, but in hours of rowing, in the pattern of tides, in the memory of previous voyages. If a certain stretch of open sea once required 3 days under moderate wind, then exceeding that span signals deviation. The Vikings build mental maps shaped by repetition and storytelling. These maps are not drawn on parchment. They live in memory, fjords remembered for their shape, islands recalled for their rocky outlines, currents known for their strength. Younger sailors absorb these stories slowly, adding detail with each voyage. Even smell can provide clues. Land carries a scent, faint earthiness carried by wind, especially when forests line the shore. In winter, that scent is subtle, but not entirely absent. You inhale deeply when the breeze shifts, searching for hints beyond salt. Navigation demands constant awareness. There is no autopilot, no instrument panel glowing with precise coordinates. Instead, there is attention, steady and unbroken. You realize that drifting unknowingly would be more dangerous than facing storms. A storm can be endured, but losing direction entirely might lead you into unknown waters, into ice fields of distant coasts, unprepared for arrival. The helmsman rarely rests fully. Even when others take brief moments to eat or adjust clothing, he remains alert. His eyes trace the horizon repeatedly. His hands feel the rudder's resistance, sensing subtle changes in current strength. You begin to appreciate how navigation is as much art as science here. It blends observation with instinct. It relies on shared memory and quiet communication. No single man carries all the knowledge. It is distributed across the crew. As twilight settles again, clouds thin just enough to reveal a handful of stars. You find the North Star once more, steady and distant. The helmsman adjusts slightly, aligning the bow with that faint point of certainty. The sea remains vast and indifferent. The sky remains unpredictable, but through careful reading of light, wind, water, and memory, you continue forward rather than wandering blindly. In winter at sea, direction is survival, and survival depends not only on strength or endurance, but on knowing, always knowing, where you are headed, even when the world offers few visible signs. You barely notice it, a thin sheen along the rail where sea spray has settled and frozen. It glitters faintly in the dim winter light, almost beautiful in its delicacy. But beauty is deceptive here. That fragile glaze is the beginning of something heavier, something dangerous. Each wave that crashes against the hull throws more water into the air. In summer, it would drip harmlessly back into the sea. Now it clings, it freezes. It layers itself slowly over wood and rope and shield. You run your hand along the side of the ship and feel the stiffness already forming. The planks that flexed freely during storms now begin to feel constrained beneath a tightening crust. The shields hanging along the sides collect frost along their rims. Ropes stiffen, losing their easy give. The longship was designed to ride waves, to bend and shift with them. Ice works against that design. As hours pass in the freezing wind, the build-up grows thicker. What was once a sheen becomes ridges. What was once light becomes weight. You begin to feel the difference in the ship's motion. It sits lower in the water, not dramatically, but enough to sense. Weight is dangerous at sea. The crew notices immediately. There is no need for alarmed discussion. Axes and wooden mallets are retrieved without ceremony. You tethered